and welcome. A common question I get asked is, do you have a suggested reading list? I could simply point to the archive of videos and say, well, all of that. Instead, I've put together this video for anyone looking for superhero material to read. Obviously, I've not read everything ever published. For the most part, this reflects my reading habits and my taste. However, I tried to incorporate a variety of titles with different types of stories. This way a lot of superhero flavors are represented. Finally, these are not in-depth reviews. I'm going for quantity over quality. I'll mention a few details and why each series is worth a read. This is definitely not a comprehensive list. In fact, I could easily make this a multi-part series if there's demand for it. But for now, there will be enough suggestions to keep you busy for a little while. Alright, let's get into it. Darwin Cook's look at a portion of comic book history is sublime. It documents the transition of the superhero genre from the Golden Age to the Silver Age. In many ways, it reflects the prevailing attitude towards superheroes during that time. They go from being outlawed and derided to being the saviors of the world, and metaphorically, they are the salvation of the medium itself. Although, historically speaking, comics were doing just fine. Superheroes were definitely hurting though, and something was needed to revitalize the genre. With New Frontier, Cook explores the appeal of classic superheroes and the challenges the characters faced during this transitory period. The plot revolves around a mysterious island, which is where the classic war comic, The War That Time Forgot, took place. The island evolves, in a manner of speaking, to become a worldwide threat. It targets America first. The American superheroes come together for the first time to defeat this powerful, silent menace. While it is a large story, its pace is very quick. You'll get to the end before you know it. Overall, it embodies hope and a sense that the world is changing in ways that one can't predict. It's a bubble of comfort before a decade of uncertainty and change. It's uplifting without being overly sentimental. Astro City, the long-running series written by Kurt Busiek, with artwork primarily done by Brent Anderson, looks at the excitement and wonder of the 60s, but filtered through a modern lens. Despite being modernized, it's neither grim nor gritty, nor is it a deconstruction of superheroes. It's a series that has its own unique voice and point of view. There's a fair amount of mythology and world building in Astro City, and you'll find a number of disguised homages to popular mainstream characters. These homages are more patchwork than you might expect. For example, you could say the Confessor is, basically, Batman, but with a supernatural origin and a religious personality. So he's a bit like Batman, but he's also a bit like Daredevil and Dracula. Essentially, Busiek creates an archetype from many different sources. Each collection is packaged by story arcs, and for the most part, each volume is self-contained. Additionally, you can start just about anywhere and not feel like you're lost in a quagmire of continuity. Although, I'd suggest starting at Volume 1 and getting a taste of what the series is like in a general sense. Like any long-running series, some volumes will be more appealing than others. But overall, it's a good example of how to approach the genre in modern times without resorting to modern trends. Rising Stars by J. Michael Straczynski is a complete 24-issue story. The series is reasonably tight, and it's a decent replacement for anyone who read his incomplete Supreme Power saga. The basic premise is this: 113 children born in a small town suddenly gain superpowers. Naturally, the government gets concerned and monitors these special children. The children grow up. Some put on a costume and fight crime. Some put on a costume and commit crime. Most exist somewhere in the middle, living their lives like average people with one amazing ability. The most interesting twist? When one of them dies, their power is evenly distributed among the rest. So, it's a little like the movie series Highlander, but with superheroes. It's a very involved story that doesn't contain a lot of superhero action. It's like a TV show, where action scenes are used for effect, rather than being the focus of the show. So overall, it's a drama series, with a number of people wearing a costume. After doing projects like From Hell and Lost Girls, Alan Moore gave the medium a thinly disguised Superman story. It may have been called Supreme, but there was no doubt the protagonist and the supporting cast were transparent versions of Superman characters. Supreme was split into two portions. There was the present-day storyline, which was illustrated in the standard Awesome Comics house style, and there were inserts of the past, done by Rick Veitch. Naturally, both segments build towards the finale. Moore had previously written a few memorable Superman stories. Both examples were short and sweet pieces involving the Man of Steel. However, with Supreme, he gets to spend a long time with the Superman character, evolving the concept and creating a reasonable challenge for someone who is practically incapable of failure. Much like he did with Miracleman and Swamp Thing, Moore incorporates and expands the silly but charming aspects of Superman. I mean Supreme. It is functionally a love letter to the comics he grew up reading. The only downside is this might be hard to find, but the first 12 issues are worth the effort. Everything after that is just fine, but it doesn't read like Moore is heading anywhere specific, and it abruptly ends without resolution due to Awesome Comics falling into disarray. Planetary is Warren Ellis's best piece of work. Yes, better than Transmetropolitan or The Authority. Not to mention, the material is elevated by the stellar artwork of John Cassaday. R.I.P. Mr. Cassaday, you went far too soon. Planetary is a slightly disguised look at comic book history, using characters that are, again, slightly disguised versions of more well-known characters. What really makes this piece work is a few things. With the exception of a few times, each issue is self-contained. Ellis builds a tight, epic story issue by issue, as opposed to story arc by story arc. There is no padding whatsoever. It's the opposite of the decompression technique he popularized with The Authority. Unlike a lot of his work from this period, it doesn't get too edgy, and the concepts don't get too far-fetched. That said, it does contain a lot of elements that are prevalent in his work, such as an arrogant leader and cutting-edge science theory, but they are accessible and on point. All of this is wonderfully illustrated by Cassaday, who alters his style while maintaining its core aesthetic to fit the story being told. Visually, it could not have been told by anyone else. Oh, the heartbreak of editorial control. New X-Men begins off strong, and for a Grant Morrison title, it's reasonably straightforward. Morrison is clearly having fun, and they try to literally evolve the characters into modern times. It does get a tad messy in places, and the ending might not stick, but that's mainly due to editorial interference. Morrison was allowed some liberty to play with the concept, and then, at a certain point, it was decided that maybe they'd been given too much freedom. So what Morrison intended might not have made it to the page. Regardless, it's an interesting bit of X-Men history. Okay, this is not strictly a superhero title, although I'd argue Jedi and Sith are basically superheroes at this point. Anyway, Kieran Gillen's 25-issue run is quite spectacular. It tests the character and runs him through the paces. Best of all, it shows why Vader is feared and respected in the Empire. The series leaves no doubt that Vader earned the position he attained. He's quiet, clever, and capable of navigating the challenges that arise for someone in a high-profile, powerful position. And when necessary, he's an engine of violence and destruction. As a high-action, high-drama character piece, it hits all the right beats. The Jeff Johns Green Lantern reboot and the subsequent ongoing series is an area where Johns excels, in my opinion. As it evolves, the series does get a little bogged down with massive crossovers and such, but overall, Johns provides some good character moments, some interesting situations, and solid mythology building, while not trying to be Alan Moore. Being deep and dark is not his strength. His strength is action stories with a touch of light melodrama that doesn't attempt to have any meaningful intent. Green Lantern may be one of the best examples of his purely commercial writing, although I would have to add that JSA is also a solid Johns run. X-Statix by Peter Milligan and Mike Allred is weird, satirical, and completely what you wouldn't expect from a Marvel superhero title, especially one that is, in theory, an X-Men related comic. In fact, I'm not even sure if this is part of Marvel continuity, but it might be, I simply don't know. For about 2 years, Milligan and Allred got to do a lot of wild stuff that was only possible during the Bill Jemas era of Marvel Comics. It examines the cult of celebrity around superheroes and the entitlement those heroes feel due to their position in society. At the same time, they are kind of disposable and easily replaced. Both points fit very well with Marvel's most popular franchise. It's definitely a series that deserves a closer examination at a later point. Jack Staff is a highly entertaining comic by Paul Grist. It's set within one location, the fictional city of Castletown, and it contains a vast supporting cast that fills out this solitary landscape. It succeeds in telling a solid story, utilizing well-defined characters working through a challenging situation. It's neither grim nor gritty, nor does it present heavy moral conflicts disguised as a transparent discussion of current social issues. The lack of pretense is infinitely charming, all of which makes Jack Staff sound a little shallow. However, there is a complex good versus evil saga hidden just below the surface. Unfortunately, a highly erratic publishing schedule, mixed with a unique storytelling method and a cartoonish art style, led to low sales. The series was discontinued in 2011, so any further developments of that saga have gone unexplored. Regardless, it's a perfect story for those that want a slightly lighter tone, but a depth of storytelling that will keep you engaged. It's quite delightful. Let's dim the lights and look at a few titles about superheroes that are much darker. Most of these have dedicated videos about them already, but they do deserve a brief mention to round out this list. When it comes to a critique of superheroes by a team who dislikes superheroes, the writer, Pat Mills, and the artist, Kevin O'Neill, produced the greatest piece of work in that specific genre. As many have noted, this is The Boys long before The Boys existed. And it's 1,000 times better, much shorter, and the point is driven home much harder. Marshal Law is a superhero that hates superheroes. The level of loathing and disgust is palpable in every scene. He takes out that self-inflicted pain and rage on everyone in a costume. Overall, the plot focuses on Marshal Law attempting to bring a superhero serial killer to justice. Yet, his contempt for the superhero that inspired him blinds his investigation. He focuses on the object of his hatred, on the person that symbolizes everything that influenced him to become the man he's become. That said, solving the mystery isn't the point of the story. It's a setup to critique superheroes, the unnecessary pointless violence they represent, and how those that seem to have the best qualities are nothing more than empty costumes, signifying empty ideals. Historically, The Authority will likely be remembered as a very influential series. It rose from the ashes of Stormwatch to become a must-read title in the Wildstorm universe. One could make a reasonable argument that its popularity inspired the rise of darker, more violent superhero content in the early 2000s. This was chiefly orchestrated by Warren Ellis, but added to by Mark Millar and Grant Morrison. This is a series about superheroes being proactive and policing the entire world. They work as an independent enforcement group outside any government influence. This wasn't the first time the concept was explored, but it is the most notorious. The team seems to exist in the morally gray area of having the power to effect a positive change, but also displaying the arrogance to believe everything they do is important and above any type of critique. It does lack any subtlety, but considering the era, subtlety wasn't a huge part of the superhero genre at that time. The first 12 issues are the best the series gets. After that, it slides into cheap theatrics and scenes intended to shock fans of superheroes. Regardless, both approaches were probably influential to a degree. This is a mainstream comic, but the subject matter puts it in the darker category. In what could have been a terrible, watered-down story about mental illness, J.M. DeMatteis and Mike Zeck produced a layered look at the villain, Kraven. Perhaps the aspect that stands out, other than the obvious examination of a person succumbing to darkness, is that the hero loses, and there's no chance at redemption. There is a nihilistic finality not ordinarily seen in any superhero content, let alone in Marvel's most popular property. There is a lack of closure that lingers after the story is complete, as it should, since acts of this nature always remain in the minds of those left behind. Before the writer, Ed Brubaker, and the artist, Sean Phillips, created the Criminal series, they worked together on Sleeper. The title is about the seedy underworld of the Wildstorm universe. It is, for the most part, about high-stakes espionage, with the lead character working for a criminal organization while attempting to destroy it from within. It's a series about smart, believable characters doing smart, believable things. Of everything the two have produced together, I put Sleeper in the top spot. I don't think they've explored a better villain than Tao, nor do I think they've created a more complex, darkly attractive femme fatale than Ms. Misery. And the man in the middle, Holden Carver, has a controlled level of desperation and justified paranoia that permeates every scene. It is modern noir and superheroes in a perfect mix. At this point, I've written about or mentioned Miracleman so often that not including it on this list would look like an oversight. In my opinion, one of the defining features of Alan Moore's career is revamping and revitalizing pre-existing characters and concepts. The examples are numerous: Captain Britain, Miracleman, Swamp Thing, and Supreme. Then there's Watchmen, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and according to Rob Liefeld and some published material, both Tom Strong and Promethea originally began as proposals for two Awesome Comics properties, Prophet and Glory. Of all these examples, Miracleman is one of the more complete entries. It's about a superhero discovering he's a god, who then goes to war with another god, and how that conflict impacts the entire world. While the series did continue after Moore left, it didn't need to. There is a finality that didn't need further elaboration. And at this point, with the allegations against Neil Gaiman, that continuation is likely never to be finished. There you go, a list of 10 superhero titles worth reading, and 5 darker titles you might want to check out. As mentioned at the beginning, this could easily become a multi-part series if there's demand for it. So, leave a comment with your suggestions, give the video a like, and do all that engagement stuff that the mythical algorithm seems to like. As a personal side note, this is the video that killed my previous computer. It was about 90% done when it seized up and died. So rewriting the script from scratch and replicating the video was a difficult process, but a necessary part of moving past that highly anxious time. However, this crisis-level event led to a great deal of support from the community, and that's something I'm not likely to forget anytime soon. And I appreciate all of you being patient between videos as I rebuild and try to get back to the finely tuned state before the crash. Thank you for watching. Thanks to all my fine supporters on Patreon and YouTube. Your ongoing support makes it possible for this channel to continue. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so very, very much. Extra special thanks to Eidolon, Constant Disappointment Records, Jeff Nicholson, Sickin, Francis De La Cruz, Chris Malloy, John Nyukes, Andrew Barton, Odin Ashcroft, Ruby St. Dennis, Phil Sagan, Edward Clayton Andrews, Corey Drew, L.S. Gregor, Brian Deaton, Tom Granis, James Graham, and Matt Marino. You are all justified and ancient. Until next time.